Hi y'all, welcome back. Today, let's talk about fanfic. So this is a very quick rundown of fanfic, in case anybody watching doesn't know what it is. Now, this is a really short explanation. If you want to know more about the history of fanfic or more about the legality of it, then I highly recommend Jill Barrett's video series on fanfic that is here on YouTube. Fanfic, or sometimes just fic, is short for fan fiction. So fan fiction takes characters or worlds that were created by someone else other than the writer and tells an original story. For example, if someone is a fan of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer series, but really wanted Buffy to end up with Spike, they might decide to write their own Spuffy fanfic where they might decide to write their own Spuffy fanfic where Buffy and Spike end up together. Or maybe they really like the characters of Kylo Ren and Rey from Star Wars, but they don't like science fiction, so they write a story with those characters set in the Middle Ages or present day Earth. If you can think of a fandom, chances are there is a fic out there that ships just about any character in that fandom that you can think of. And yes, us fanfic readers, writers love our portmanteaus of Spuffy, Reylo, etc. And we love shipping characters, which means putting characters together that aren't in a romantic relationship in the original work. Essentially, a fanfic author is writing about characters or a universe that they did not create and do not own. You can pick up an old school black composition book and write stories about your favorite characters from your favorite TV shows, movies, books, etc. And guess what? You're writing fanfic. Some people like to share the stories they write, so they post them to any number of websites dedicated to hosting fanfic for hundreds of thousands of writers. Archive of Our Own, also known as AO3, and fanfic.net are two of the biggest ones out there. How is all of this legal? Well, disclaimer before we get into that, I'm not a lawyer, and nor do I play one on TV. None of this should be considered legal advice. If you have questions about copyright law or need legal advice on it, seek out an attorney that specializes in copyright law. Don't take advice from a stranger on the internet, please. Fanfic exists in this legally gray area that involves a bit of a loophole in copyright law. This loophole is that if you don't hold the copyright to something, then you aren't allowed to profit off of anything involving that something because it takes money away from the actual copyright holder / owner. But as long as you aren't selling anything or making any money off of your fic, then the copyright holder isn't technically losing any money. So fanfic sites are free to post on and free to access for anyone that wants to create a profile. Most of the site owners are volunteers that are volunteering their time to administer the site, and they pay for basic operating costs, usually by donation. So since nobody is making any money off of this, most of the copyright holders will just kind of ignore that it exists. And personally, I think all this is great. I love that people have an outlet to continue telling stories in their favorite universes after the original stories have ended. I love that people can share their fix-it fics that are what-if stories where a major plot point goes the opposite direction, or their tales of the hijinks of side characters that they felt didn't get enough screen time in the original work. Why am I even talking about fanfic? Well, there's some really great writers out there that are producing some really great fanfic stories. Occasionally, one will get popular enough that traditional publishers will start to pay attention to it. They may even decide to pick it up and actually publish it, usually with a reskin, which is where the author keeps the general plot and the character development in the story, but makes enough changes to the characters in the world, usually the names of things, descriptions, etc., so that they can no longer be considered part of the original universe that the author created it in. The most well-known example of this is probably 50 Shades of Grey. That actually started out as Twilight fanfic. When it was picked up for traditional publishing, Edward and Bella became Christian and Anna. Another one that was pretty popular is Taya Guanzon's The Hurricane Wars. This was originally a Reylo fanfic, Kylo Ren / Rey, about an arranged marriage that got pretty popular and was picked up and published traditionally. This brings us to the book that I actually want to talk about, which is Rose in Chains by Julie Soto. So just a warning, there's a lot of talk about non-consent and dubious consent in the rest of this video, so if you find that triggering, please feel free to skip watching this. Also, spoiler warnings for Rose in Chains apply. So I picked up this book right after I finished reading The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. Now, as much as I loved The Everlasting, because it was an amazing book, it was the best book I read last year and probably one of the best books I've ever read, it was a little tame in the spice department for me. I tend to like my romantasy definitely on the spicy side. I'd watched content from other book creators and they were recommending Rose in Chains as pretty unhinged because it involved the female main character being sold into slavery to the male main character. So I decided to give it a shot. Now, I knew what I was getting into. I knew this book was going to be dark. So when I started reading it, I was enjoying it, but there was this slight undercurrent of just ickiness about reading it, which to me was really odd because even though this book is really dark, I typically don't have a problem reading this kind of stuff in works of fantasy fiction. Then it was at about the halfway mark when I finally realized what I was actually reading. Y'all, I was reading a fanfic about characters from a certain universe where a teenage wizard goes to a secret school for 7 years and then battles a dark lord. Yeah, we don't platform TERFs here, so I'm not going to say the actual name or the author, but y'all know who I'm talking about. Julie Soto had done a really good job with reskinning and world building in the first half of the book, so that I had no idea that these characters were based off that wizard universe. Then at about that halfway point, it seemed to me like she got a little lazy. Like the characters in Rose in Chains went to school together as teenagers as part of a treaty. The flashbacks when they were at the school, the characters were calling their counterparts from the other side by their last names, just like in that wizarding world. When the author starts talking about spells and charms and curses, it sounds just like the spells and charms and curses from that wizard world. Then the male main character gets the bones in his arm destroyed by a curse, just like a character does in that wizard world. So it was very obvious once I reached that point what I was really reading. And the story that Soto was telling here is dark. It's much, much darker than the original material. Specifically, this is a story where the bad guy had won and all of the magic doers from the good side were captured and sold into slavery to the bad guys. The book actually starts out with the palace in the good kingdom being sacked by the bad guys and the princess, who is our female main character, being captured. And it really just does get darker from there. See, the bad guys have figured out a way to increase their magical power using spicy time magic. But it has to be consensual for it to work. So somebody created a potion to give to the spicy slaves to induce consent. Yeah, it is that bad. There is actually a scene at a dinner party where one of the women has been given this potion, so the reader can actually see what the actual effects of it are. And that was where the ick factor just really increased exponentially for me. But I still couldn't figure out why. This type of stuff didn't bother me. Usually when I read it, I've read it in other fanfics set in other universes. I've read it in other romantasy books and it doesn't bother me. So why is it bothering me now that I realize that this book is based on this particular fandom? I went ahead and finished the book because I wanted to see how things would play out. And I felt like I needed to take a shower when I got done reading this. And I still couldn't figure out why this was bothering me. So I did what I always do when I can't figure something out. I called the smartest person I know, my mom. Why is she the smartest person I know? Well, because she's a mom and moms know everything. Yeah, she used to say that to me when I asked questions as a kid. I love my mom. Anyway, so we were on the phone for about an hour talking about this book and my reaction to it when she finally hit the nail on the head. She said, well, maybe it bothers you because you were a teenager when you first read these books and you still see the characters as teenagers. Well, damn. That was exactly it. Once I realized I was reading about these teenage wizards and witches from that school that shall not be named, I couldn't unsee it. Even though the author had aged up the characters and made it clear that they were adults in their early 20s, in my mind, I was still reading about teenagers. And teenagers that were being put into settings that teenagers should never be put into. And it just gave me the ick. Like, really gave me the ick. It completely spoiled most of the enjoyment I was getting out of the book and pretty much ensured that I wasn't going to read any further in this series. And now I'm annoyed because I felt like I had wasted my time reading a book that I wouldn't have picked up at all had I known what it was based on. None of this is meant to be a judgment against anybody that enjoyed Rose in Chains or Alchemized by Sin Lin Yu for that matter. I have not read that one, but it is very similar to Rose in Chains and it's based on the same universe. So if you enjoyed either of those books, I'm so glad you enjoyed them and you should continue to do so. The whole point of me posting videos like this is to call attention to things that I think are problematic in popular romance books while acknowledging that it is still okay to enjoy them. Like I said earlier, I don't have issues with fanfic. This particular world just isn't a fandom that I care to read more about, and I especially don't want to read about a dark romance set in that fandom. And if I feel that way, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of other people out there that feel the same way. For me, it was just an icky feeling that made me kind of uncomfortable, but other people might have a much more serious reaction to something like this. So I think that authors of traditionally published fanfic should be able to make sure that their readers know exactly what they're getting into. I know the legalities of actually doing so would probably be really tricky, if not downright insurmountable, but I really wish that fact had been included in the trigger warnings or in the summaries of this book that I read. I did find out after the fact that book content creators had talked about it being based on that Wizard universe, but somehow I managed to miss it all before I started reading it. So, what do you think? Is this something that authors should call out? Is this something that you think fans should know before they get into reading a book? Please feel free to leave me a comment with your opinion on this. I want to know what y'all think. Anyway, that's all I have for today. I'll see you next time.